on Acast and wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Rebalance with Kamahl Santamaria.
Yes, hello, welcome back to Rebalance. I am Kamahl Santamaria with a slightly different podcast for you this week. Not one of these sort of produced narratives or stories, which I really do love putting together to explore other sides of the news. This is more of a chat because the subject at hand, which is, of course, the fact that the United States government appears to be conducting its business, and that includes, well, war business, essentially, on Signal, on a messaging app, is such an extraordinary story that you just kind of have to talk it through. And there are so many elements to it. I think it kind of distills down to an element of extreme seriousness and an element of extreme stupidity. And I don't say that lightly. There are just some incredibly stupid things being done and said in relation to this story. I'm actually going to start with someone else who can explain some of that stupidity. And apologies for some of the industrial language that he uses. This is Ben Rhodes, who is a former Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications. He worked for President Obama. He's a commentator now. And, well, this is a montage of what he had to say. Have a listen.
So the first point is that this is not normal. Like, this is not something that anybody else has ever done. This is fucking insane. You know, just adding Jeff Goldberg is one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever heard of in my life. It's a war plan, whatever the fuck Pete Hegseth says. It lays it all out. Why he needed to text that on Signal is insane to me. But even worse for Hegseth, I think it was probably him like showing off for his buddies. Like, hey man, look at the strike package. I also have questions. Was he drunk? I'm actually serious about this. If Steve Witkoff was on this text thread from Moscow, that's mind-blowing. The fact that this didn't run through Steve Witkoff's head, maybe I shouldn't be on a sensitive text thread about a military operation while I'm in Moscow.
Yeah.
These people are so reckless and incompetent.
Ben Rhodes there speaking on the Pod Save the World podcast, which I really enjoy listening to every week. Very good breakdowns of what's going on in the world from people who have been involved in this sort of thing. What Ben has colourfully identified there are the two main issues. One, that government business was being conducted on Signal, on a messaging app, which any one of us can have on our phones. And I'm using this phrase government business. It was to do with military attacks on the Houthis in Yemen. And we'll get into that later, the whole semantics of war or attacks. And the other issue, of course, is the fact that a reporter from The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, was included on it. It is, can you imagine? I don't even have to do the work here. They are looping me in. They have invited me into this chat. Though, of course, they didn't invite him into this chat. That's what they're saying now. Have a listen. Mike Waltz, who is the current National Security Advisor and the person who set up this group chat on Signal.
But how did a Trump-hating editor of The Atlantic end up on your Signal chat?
You know, Laura, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but of all the people out there, somehow this guy who has lied about the president, who has lied to Gold Star families, lied to their attorneys, and gone to Russia hoax, gone to just all kinds of links to lie and smear the president of the United States, and he's the one that somehow gets on somebody's contact and then gets sucked into this group.
Yeah, he somehow got on somebody's contacts and got sucked into the group. No, he didn't, Mike Waltz. You added him. The proof is there. The screenshots have been shown. Michael Waltz added you, Jeffrey Goldberg, to this group. It is there. And it is extraordinary. And he's basically trying to say, oh, I don't even know the guy. I've never met him before. I've never communicated with him before. Why was he in your contacts then? That's how Signal works. You invite people who are currently in your contacts on your phone to chat either one-on-one or in a group. And yet Mike Waltz is going on Fox News there and which is obviously a very friendly audience for him, and saying, hey, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but here's a conspiracy theory for you. So that's one way of dealing with it, that this Trump White House has decided to deal with it. Conspiracy theory. The second one, and I mentioned this before, it is semantics. War plans. Attack plans. Have a listen here to Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, essentially talking about texting war plans.
Nobody's texting war plans. Well, I noticed this morning, out came something that doesn't look like war plans. And as a matter of fact, they even changed the title to attack plans because they know it's not war plans. There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths, no sources, no methods, no classified information.
That's been a big thing. Oh, there was no classified information. And I think so much of that has to come down to, believe it or not, how you want to interpret what is classified. Let's not forget, Donald Trump had classified documents sitting in his toilet, in his bathroom in Mar-a-Lago in Florida. But he said, oh, they're not classified because I said they weren't. I declassified them. In fact, I may be wrong here. I know he said that a document can be declassified or information can be declassified just by the president saying it. I think he once even said the president can just think it in his own head and it's declassified. So, that's what we're dealing with when we're talking about classified. The other thing Hegseth was talking about there was saying, oh, there were no flight plans, there were no details, there were no locations. Fair enough. I am looking at the texts right now from the group chat. What there is still a lot of information. 12:15 Eastern Time, F-18s launched, first strike package. 1:45 or 13:45, trigger-based F-18 first strike window start. So we're getting timings there of when the window opens. Also, strike drones launch, brackets MQ-9, so I guess that's a type of strike drone. At 14:10 to 10 p.m., more F-18s launch, second strike package, and it goes on and on like this, a whole timeline. They're lucky that it's Jeff Goldberg who's in the chat and not a Houthi who's finding out about the whole timeline for attacks. So this is, again, the way that the White House is trying to spin it and saying, those aren't war plans. Those are attack plans. And look, The Atlantic changed it. They're calling it attack plans now. It was sensitive, important material which you would want kept secret, and it was being discussed on a chat group on Signal. Let's look at how Donald Trump's reacted to all of this. This is him actually being asked about Pete Hegseth and whether the Secretary of Defense should resign or not.
Hegseth is doing a great job. He had nothing to do with this. Hegseth. How do you bring Hegseth into it? He had nothing to do. Look, it's all a witch hunt. Here we are talking about some of the greatest business deals ever made. The greatest companies in the world are moving into the United States, and you want to ask about whether or not Signal works. I don't know that Signal works. I think Signal could be defective, to be honest with you. And I think that's what we have to, because you use Signal and we use Signal and everybody uses Signal, but it could be a defective platform, and we're going to have to find that out.
Right, so we're back to the Signal angle, the conspiracy angle. Oh, maybe it was hacked. Maybe it's defective, and we all use it, and we've got to check this out because maybe it was wrong. Again, I keep coming back to this word stupidity, but they are saying things which fly in the face of all the evidence. And you heard the reporters there at the start when he said, hey, why do Hegseth's doing a great job. He had nothing to do with this. Why do you want to bring Hegseth in it? And the reporters are incredulous. They're like, of course he's something to do with it. He's the Secretary of Defense. He orders this stuff. And actually, did you notice in that how disinterested Donald Trump sounded? He's not interested. And in other sound bites, he'll say, well, I wasn't involved. I wonder if he's actually upset that he wasn't involved. He's like, hey, you guys didn't invite me to the group chat. It is incredible how disinterested the president appears to be about this. He wants to focus, of course, on business and Elon Musk and Doge and all these sorts of things. The bottom line is that Signal or any messaging app like this is not what should be used for conducting this sort of government or any government business, really. But apparently it's Signal that's the problem. What else did I want to talk about? Oh yes, the Principals Committee, PC. You might have seen that in the name of the group chat. It's called the Houthis PC, small group, Principals Committee. That is top-level people who are to be kept informed and who are making decisions on, in this case, a strike on the Houthis. I want to go back to Ben Rhodes, have a listen to him again, because he's someone who's been involved in these before, and he recounts here what it was like for him, and I really think effectively how this should be done.
When I was traveling, I remember one time, for instance, I was traveling in Oregon. I was on like a family vacation and I had to join a PC. I had to drive an hour and a half to an FBI field office to be escorted into a room with a secure video connection into the Situation Room. And I didn't think twice about that. I mean, like the idea that I'd just be on my phone is nuts.
So that gives you more of an idea of how this business should be conducted and that it shouldn't be done, as he says, in a car park on his phone. Because I think that's what Jeffrey Goldberg was saying. He was in Washington, D.C. in his car outside a grocery store watching all these texts come down in absolute disbelief. So the tactics, what have we had so far? We've had conspiracy, we've had deflection, we've had Trump showing disinterest. There is one more angle, and that's the sort of, I don't know. Have a listen to Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, who was on the thread.
The release of the screenshots that came from that chat group today were a refresher on what happened. As I said earlier, I was not involved with that portion of the chat, so it did not come to my recollection yesterday.
So it would seem there, from the words of the Director of National Intelligence, that ignorance is an excuse here. It's just amazing. And the fact that this is happening at such a high level, we're not talking about mid-level staffers here who maybe don't know any better or who are new, or these are people who are, in some cases, career politicians, and in some cases, I guess in Pete Hegseth's case, he's a Fox News host. So, maybe that tells you what you need to know. So what you will have noticed in this chat so far is that there isn't really anything to rebalance. That's what I like to do. I like to take a story, take a prevailing narrative and rebalance it. I can't find a way to rebalance this one. There isn't. Because everything that has been done and the response has been wrong. There is no other side to this story. What there is, though, and if there's any way to rebalance it, it's the stuff which has come out of the chat which isn't getting as much play. And it is still important stuff. And I want to mention a couple of those now, just to keep them on the radar. One is Europe. Now, we already know there is animosity towards Europe from this administration. There's an exchange in the group chat between Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Vance says to Hegseth, if you think we should do it, let's go. In other words, let's start these strikes. He goes on to say, I just hate bailing Europe out again. And Hegseth replies, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic, in capital letters. What they're talking about is they're saying, well, there's a lot of European trade that goes through this area, through the Suez Canal, linking Europe through Africa into Asia. It's an important passageway, and it's more European ships which will pass through that area and which are therefore at risk from the Houthis. So the US is saying here, we got to come in and bail out Europe again. We're looking after them. They don't appreciate us. Their navies couldn't even handle this, and we're the ones who have to do it. It is that strong anti-Europe vibe which comes out of this administration. Europe should know by now that this is not, at least for the next 4 years, an administration which they can rely on or which they could possibly even call an ally. I don't know that Europe and the United States can consider themselves allies anymore. So I feel that's something just to remember in the background, that even when it comes to this sort of thing, it's still about, Europe, and why do we have to do this for them? And they keep screwing us over and we have to bail them out and we have to save them. So that's one thing. The other thing, and I'm looking back again at the screenshots, Michael Waltz says, this is after the first strikes have happened, he says, the first target, their top missile guy, so that's the Houthis' top missile guy, we had positive ID of him walking into his girlfriend's building and it's now collapsed. J.D. Vance replies, excellent. Marco Rubio replies, good job, Pete, and your team. Imagine that reversed. Imagine a quote-unquote terrorist targeting someone in the United States and seeing that they had walked into their girlfriend's building, so they bomb the building and the building collapses. That would be considered unacceptable. If this was going on with an attack on the United States, there would be outrage over this sort of thing. It's just extraordinary. I know I keep saying that, but it really is. And none of this, those things I've just mentioned, will be addressed because this is the deflection White House. This is the avoidance White House. I'm going to wrap it up now with a montage from Caroline Leavitt, who is, of course, the White House press secretary. I did a editorial on her last week, where actually I'm impressed by her. I think she does, for what her job is, she does an excellent, excellent job. And in this particular briefing to the media, yeah, she stood up there for 22 minutes and fired back at every question she was given, didn't miss a beat, very confident. The problem was she was just talking nonsense most of the time. So here is approximately 45 seconds of that nonsense.
But the mainstream media continues to be focused on a sensationalized story from the failing Atlantic magazine that is falling apart by the hour. It proves that Democrats and their propagandists in the mainstream media know how to fabricate, orchestrate, and disseminate a misinformation campaign quite well. The real story here is the overwhelming success of President Trump's decisive military action against Houthi terrorists. This is an approved app. It's an encrypted app. It is the most secure and efficient way to communicate. And again, this message, there was no classified information transmitted. There were no war plans discussed. Plenty of time for more questions. Sorry, it's a bit shorter today, guys. We'll see you later.
Jeffrey Goldberg's number and Michael Rose's phone if he's a registered Democrat and anti-Trump reporter.
And do have a look at the YouTube feed for The Balance, at The Balance feed. That actually is taken from a YouTube short, which I did, which I called The 7 Steps to Dealing with a Crisis, MAGA style. And if you watch the video, you'll get a little bit more context as to what those steps are, as I've identified them, and how they fit into what Leavitt was saying there. As I say, I think she's a very, very good communicator. But if you are communicating, pardon my language, absolute bullshit, how much of a communicator are you? Look, we're living in this world now. Up is down, left is right. A lot of things don't seem to make sense. We just take it as it comes. So thanks for listening to this podcast. Yeah, a little different, as I said. And, well, we'll just see what happens next week. We'll have to see how this story plays out. We will likely have another crazy story by the time I next speak to you. In the meantime, check us out on social media at The Balance feed. Drop me a line if you like. Head to thebalance.website. And I'll talk to you again soon.
Rebalance is a production of the Balance.website and is brought to you by Acast. For more, visit shows.acast.com/rebalance.